we need good news, right? It's very rare, it seems, well, just lately for some reason, but in general, good news in the church seems to be kind of hit or miss. It rarely comes. I often get critiqued for not bringing you good news. When I do bring it to you, people tend not to care, but hopefully today people will care. The case of Sister Wilhelmina Lancaster, the recently found incorrupt nun who had in life been dedicated to the faith and to its traditional expressions of the faith, has taken a bit of an interesting and hope-inspiring turn. We're going to start there before we turn to the more usual fare of less than hopeful news in the church. The story of a canceled priest trying to defend himself, his case, and his right to speak freely on the crisis in the church. Let's start with the good news first. So for a bit of refresher, let's take a look at this article from last June from the Catholic Review, because I think people may have forgotten a little bit about the story. So the story is of Sister Wilhelmina, who, according to the headline from the Catholic Review, reads, "Apparently incorrupt body shows in Christ death loses its power and its sting," says the abbess. So her body was disinterred, and I don't remember the reasoning why they were doing that, but they found that she was incorrupt, and that caused all kinds of international headlines. So here's the brief recap for people who need the recap, because it happened last summer, which now seems like an eternity ago. Quote, "Mother Abbess Cecilia Snell puts a number of pilgrims who in the past 6 weeks, a year ago, who have flocked to her Benedictine Abbey in rural Missouri between 10,000 and 15,000. It's a conservative estimate," she said, "of the droves of people who at times have waited hours in line to see the body of the community's foundress, Sister Wilhelmina Lancaster. The Benedictines of Mary, Queen of Apostles, disinterred her remains April 28th, 4 years after her passing at the age of 95, and discovered a surprising lack of decay, leading to claims of her incorruptibility and potential for canonization. Now encased in glass with a thin layer of wax protecting her hands." As an aside, that's how the church has always handled incorrupts, by the way. "Sister Wilhelmina's body continues to draw both the faithful and the curious to their monastery outside of Gower, Missouri, a half-hour drive east from St. Joseph and the state's Kansas border. Most visitors are locals or from Kansas City or St. Louis. Some, however, have traveled from Washington State, Maine, California, Florida, but also from as far as Canada, Colombia, and India to see and venerate Sister Wilhelmina's body," Mother Cecilia told OSV News. "Catholics have predominated amongst the crowds, but nevertheless, we have had a great many of the curious and unbelievers as well," she said via email June 5th. "I don't believe anyone leaves the same way they came. So many times we have heard the phrase, 'This is not possible.' It is true. It is not possible, naturally speaking, but with God, all things are possible. Everyone comes away with this sense." In 2006, Sister Wilhelmina, formerly of Baltimore, led her fledgling community of sisters from Pennsylvania to the bucolic Missouri countryside, where they built their monastery in a place where they could live out the rule of St. Benedict through obedience, stability, and conversion of life. They make vestments and altar linens, tend gardens, and welcome priests on retreat. They also have received acclaim for their dozen sacred music albums, with Angels and Saints of Ephesus just re-released in February. Sister Wilhelmina is visible near the center in a wheelchair in a group photo on the sister's Amazon artist page. Also, the picture you see on screen is her. With the help of about 100 volunteers, the monastery's 44 sisters have been able to carry out her daily monastic schedule without interruption in the midst of thousands of visitors, Mother Cecilia said. "The experience has changed our life in the sense that there is more exposure. We are all well equipped to deal with it spiritually, knowing that our anchor is in the silent observance of life within the cloister. It is a beautiful thing, we think, to be able to carry out in peace, while allowing so many people to share in our prayers," she said. The sisters have heard accounts of miraculous healings from some pilgrims, including 3 children reportedly healed of severe food allergies, an autoimmune disorder, and persistent irregular blood pressure. There is also a priest who has been suffering congestive heart failure who experienced complete relief of his symptoms while here. He is awaiting medical test results as proof. Lastly, there was a focused missionary with chronic neck pain who was instantly cured upon approaching Sister Wilhelmina, Mother Cecilia said. There are possibly others, but these are the most astounding right now. End quote. Long quote from this article. I wanted to start there because there is something missing from the coverage of all this, and that is follow-ups on these stories. That is kind of a travesty, an injustice towards her cause on behalf of the Catholic media world. So if you're watching this and you know from like local reporting or from independent but verifiable independent media sources that these stories have been followed up on and their results have been reported one way or the other, please send me links to that in my email in the description box below. I'd love to do a story on that. But there is a lot more to that story if you're interested in the background, but the short version is this. Sister Wilhelmina was key in the life of the community. She passed away a few years ago. Her body was disinterred last year for examination, and she was found to be incorrupt. You probably remember the story and followed it like most Catholics did at the time. And the interesting thing about it now is that Sister Wilhelmina's body was examined by scientists. And if you're not sure why they'd be examined by scientists, it's because that's actually how the church usually does things. Miracles are usually examined by sort of disinterested third parties, meaning non-Catholics, to see if there's some logical explanation aside from the supernatural. And it was examined by scientists and determined to have been fully incorrupt. So the headline from LifeSite News, Sister Wilhelmina's body lacks features of decomposition, experts conclude. Her body does not appear to have experienced the decomposition that would normally have been expected under such previous burial conditions, local Bishop James Johnston announced following the investigation. So this is the ordinary chiming in, and that's important for the cause, for her cause to go forward, even if it doesn't go forward for many, many years or even decades, which actually, probably an unpopular opinion. I would prefer if her cause didn't really gain any momentum more than slowly gaining momentum, to allow the natural following of the laity to happen. That's a key part of a canonization, and to allow the purported miracles to actually be examined also. You want time to go on because it lends itself to authenticity. One of the reasons you hear so many modern canonizations being kind of poo-pooed by a lot of Catholics is because it seems like hardly any time passes between the passing of the person and the canonization or the beatification, to the point where people kind of question what's going on there. And then you look a little bit into the beatified person's background, and you see that there's maybe some political reason internally to the church that they're canonizing the person, and it really does undermine the whole process. And so in this case, I'd like to see this happen more slowly and have a natural following by the laity happen, which is traditionally been key to understanding that someone really is a saint, is that the laity are drawn to the person's cause, that they are praying for the person, miracles are happening, and most importantly, in the lives of those following the person, you can see holiness and sanctity as one of the fruits of that following. That's kind of what you want to see here. Now, needless to say, a body not going through the natural corruption process after the person passes away should be considered miraculous. She's been gone for now 5 years, so let's take that seriously. So let's get the details from LifeSite. Quote, Bishop James V. Johnston of Kansas City St. Joseph has released results of experts' investigations into the apparently incorrupt remains of Sister Wilhelmina Lancaster, concluding that her body shows, quote, a lack of any detected features of decomposition. On April 28, 2023, the body of Sister Wilhelmina of the Most Holy Rosary, foundress of the Benedictine Sisters of Mary, Queen of the Apostles, was exhumed at the sisters' as the sisters intended to transfer her remains into the Abbey Church. She had passed away on May 29, 2019. The diocesan press release issued August 22nd details that, quote, in the final report, the investigative team noted that the condition of Sister Wilhelmina's body during the examination was notable for a lack of any detected features of decomposition. The lining of her casket had completely deteriorated, but her habit and clothing showed no features of breakdown. The report also noted that the related history of Sister Wilhelmina's passing and internment does not describe conditions that would be expected to protect against this effect. Conducting the investigation, according to Johnson, were, quote, a team of local medical experts, led by a pathologist and joined by, quote, 2 other medical doctors and a former Missouri County coroner. In addition to examining and evaluating the mortal remains of the deceased, the team inspected the casket and interviews were conducted with eyewitnesses to events immediately preceding the burial in 2019 and the exhumation in April 2023, Johnson announced. While the investigation was described as being only, quote, limited, the investigators nevertheless stated that the, quote, condition of her body is highly atypical for the interval of nearly 4 years since her passing, especially given the environmental conditions and the findings in associated objects, end quote. So the casket showed the normal signs of passage of time that you would expect when it's interred. but not her clothing, not the objects on her person, and not her mortal remains. Again, if you're familiar when this is usually done in the secular realm for criminal investigations, you'll know that that what the condition they found her in is extraordinarily atypical, and so I'd call it miraculous. Now, I'd also like to say that the next step should be for the Vatican to investigate, but again, given the corrupt nature of the new standards for investigating Marian apparitions and how the Vatican explicitly says that they won't label anything to do with apparitions as being miraculous or supernatural in nature, leaving all that now exclusively to the Roman pontiff to decide on his own volition, I wouldn't wait with bated breath for a Vatican intervention on this, which is unfortunately a sad statement of reality. Now, speaking of corruption in Rome, we go to a little less than a happy story. I've covered this priest before. That is the story of Father Jesusmary Missigbètò. And I've covered him before. He had issues with Rome, we'll put to say mildly. He's a former Opus Day priest who was expelled from the order for the canonical crime of criticizing Pope Francis and pointing out the heresies of the coming out of Rome these days, and especially out of Francis's mouth. He might get expelled from the priesthood for his troubles. He's got an ongoing process for that. He's already been kicked out of Opus Day. He penned an open letter, which LifeSite published, and I'll go over here in full for you. And the headline for them is, Ex-Opus Day Priest to Pope Francis, I should not be suspended for correcting your errors. I do like this priest's bluntness, by the way. I find his bluntness refreshing, because sometimes these letters I give you from good bishops and other good priests, they sometimes lack bluntness. They try to show what would normally, under normal circumstances, be due deference to a pontiff, to the point of it making it hard to decipher that they're actually correcting his errors instead of begging for clarity. So here is the open letter. It isn't terribly long. Written on the memorial of the Queenship of the Blessed Virgin Mary to the reigning pontiff, Pope Francis. O dearest Father, may Jesus and Mary bless you abundantly. I am writing to you with love, trust, humility, and respect to ask of your high benevolence that my priestly ministerial faculties be granted to me once again. Thank you for receiving this letter through His Eminence Lazarus Ulhunksik, prefect of the dicastery for the clergy. Thank you also for allowing me to make it public so that cardinals, bishops, priests, and lay people can write to you through Cardinal Lazarus Yu to support my requests with an email here. You'll find it in the show notes at returntotradition.org after this broadcast is over. I pray to God that Catholic journalists and intellectuals will do the same. Having desired the priesthood at the age of 13, ordained at the age of 32 in Rome on the 5th of May 2012, I humbly beg you to put an end to the injustice that has prevented me from serving the Church and humanity with my priesthood for the past 4 years. The Church needs priests. Humanity needs priests. My ministerial faculties were unjustly withdrawn by His Excellency Fernando Ocares, prelate of Opus Dei, on the 4th of March 2021, a ban on public celebration of the Mass, preaching, or hearing confession. And on 1st of February 2022, a ban of private celebration of Mass because I, quote, published text and commentaries criticizing the Roman Pontiff. Oh, dear Father, why is this decision unjust? First reason. Before the date of 4th of March 2021, I always ask the Catholic faithful to pray for you, since you yourself usually encourage us to do so. I never use the Mass, preaching, or confession to criticize you negatively. All those who have listened to me and frequented me in my pastoral work in Umasokara on the Ivory Coast can testify and confirm to you that I am not lying. Second reason, criticism is not a canonical infraction. There is no canon in the Code of Canon Law that forbids criticism of the Roman Pontiff. In fact, you yourself told the Italian bishops on the 21st of May 2018, it is not a sin to criticize the Pope, one can do it. I'm pausing here because this is one of the reasons that they canceled Bishop Strickland. Let's continue. This means that you have given to Christians the right to criticize you when it comes to the good of the Church and souls. All Catholic journalists and intellectuals regularly do this without receiving any sanction. For a long time, several priests criticized Popes St. John Paul II and Benedict XVI negatively on the Church's traditional moral teachings concerning matters of the flesh, with examples of Thomas Rees S.J., James Martin S.J., et al. Have they been deprived of their ministerial faculties? No. Oh, dear Father, according to the dictionary, a criticism can refer to the positive or negative aspects of a thing, an individual, or a situation. As far as the negative aspects are concerned, there is a moral obligation to avoid slander. defaming by asserting the untrue, and backbiting, talking about real fault publicly and without justice or charity. For public criticism to be morally acceptable, we must therefore ask ourselves whether it is true and necessary. Personally, I have not slandered you or spoken ill of you because the content of my public criticism is true, and this criticism is necessary because of justice and charity towards you and the Christians of the whole world. In my public interventions, I have spoken about how the positive and negative aspects of your pontificate, so that all Christians are well informed about your errors, which, with the remarkable help of Cardinal Victor Manuel Fernandez, attack marriage, the family, the sacraments, and the unity of the Church under the guise of ecumenism. With citations to Amoris Laetitia, certain medical procedures, the Abu Dhabi Declaration, James Martin related laws, with a lot of years that are given as justification, Traditionis Custodes, Eucharist given to wicked, public, unrepentant, sinning Catholic politicians, Fiducia Supplicans, Dignitatis Infinita. I'm going to pause again here. One, I love the tone of this letter, but two, look at the list of his citations there. That's not even. This is not even comprehensive, by the way. That's just the last several years and the big ones. Let's continue. I have explained your half-truths, which, through relativism and situation ethics, seriously distort the moral conscience of Christians and are already being taught to future priests and seminaries around the world. All morally and intellectually honest people can confirm that the accusations I have made publicly against you are true, since I have always presented proof of them, your words and your actions. O dear Father, in acting in this way, I have fulfilled the double duty of conscience, the duty of Christian charity, spiritual work of mercy, in order to help the Pope of Mercy to get out of the grave errors that he has refused to correct for 8 years, the sacred priestly duty of preaching the truth to the people of God. My moral conscience is therefore in line with obedience to God's commandments and the examples of the saints. God demands that we live the 8th commandment and avoid the sin of adulation. Jesus asks us to make public fraternal and filial correction. God the Father repeated this advice to all Christians through St. Catherine of Siena. In Antioch, for an error far less serious than your many moral and doctrinal errors, St. Paul made a public filial correction, public criticism, to St. Peter, and informed all Christians of all times of this in his letter to the Galatians. Christian tradition, as well as St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, have praised Paul's attitude. St. Maximilian Mary Kolbe said that, quote, obedience is the sure sign to us of the divine will, but the only exception to the duty to obey is if the superior were to order something that would manifestly involve, even in the slightest way, a violation of divine law. In that case, he would not himself be a faithful interpreter of God's will. As numerous university professors and experts in history, theology, morality, and canon law have shown, you are not a faithful interpreter of the divine will, since you lead Christians to act immorally against that will. Obedience to a superior has a limit: sin. Oh, dear Father, in concluding this letter, let us remember that blinded by pride, the old scribes, Pharisees, and the leaders of our so-called elder brothers were obstinate in their errors. Hurt by the public criticism of the young Jesus, they considered him impolite, insolent, and arrogant. Yet they were wrong, for Jesus loved them deeply and was motivated only by love for their eternal salvation in everything he said and did. Even when he got angry in the temple, or used strong expressions such as the whitewashed tombs or serpents, brood of vipers. Thanks to their humility, St. Nicodemus and St. Joseph of Arimathea understood this and loved Jesus. St. John the Baptist also publicly criticized the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and Herod. Today, you have a choice. Will you follow the path of St. Nicodemus and St. Joseph of Arimathea by correcting the half-truths of your magisterium and canceling the unjust sanctions against priests and bishops who defend the truth of the Church's moral traditional teaching? Will you follow the path of Herod and the leaders, Annas and Caiaphas, who did not accept the truth preached by Jesus and John the Baptist? Your answer has heavy consequences, because the first path leads to heaven while the second leads to hell. Dear children, my Jesus loves you, but he is the just judge. Those who sow half-truths causing spiritual blindness in many of my poor children will not enter his eternal sanctuary. Love and defend the truth. Accept the gospel of my Jesus and listen to the teaching of the true magisterium of the Church. Excerpt from a message given by Our Lady of Angera on the 14th of December, 2021. The same applies to your favorite theologian, Walter Casper. Behold, many because of him will die. A message from Our Lady of Angera, 2005. United with many Christians throughout the world, I pray for you with faith, hope, and charity. As long as there is life, humility is always possible. Affectionately, your African son, Father Janvier Gbénou, pen name Father Jesusmary Missigbètò. Like I said, I love this priest writing. I absolutely do, because he will, with fraternal, you could feel the love in there, but also the bluntness. There is something refreshing about the candor in his letters, and I can't help but laugh because there's something also humorous in the presentation, unintentionally, but in the best way possible. Because the subject itself isn't funny. It isn't. But there's a candor there that is so desperately lacking in most of the writings of other prelates. My fear is that the priest will not receive his faculties back until we get a moderate to good pope. That it could be years or longer, decades. I'll take a look here at the live chat as we get ready to wrap up this live stream. Victoria says, yeah, I'm not the only one who found this funny, let's say. Well, thank you, Jim Bowden. I greatly appreciate the kind words. Anybody have any thoughts on this in the chat, please? Let's see. Damien Killer says, a priest that I know may know someone that was personally cured. This is in reference to the Sister Wilhelmina story at the beginning. He returns from his mission later today. We'll ask him in the next couple days. Retreat going on. My situation resolved. Your situation has been resolved, Damien. Very good. That's good news. Raven Ray says of the priest, he has the bravery that many of us lack. That is very true. All right, folks. Thanks very much today for tuning in. I like bringing good news stories and these kinds of letters from priests. I really do. I usually save them for the weekend. We had a lot of those this weekend. Hence why we started the week with one as well. But please pray for the priest in the story and pray for everybody involved in the cause of Sister Wilhelmina and anybody we spoke of negatively, even in passing in the stream today. We're not here to stir up negative feelings, here to inspire prayer for those figures. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.